He opened a notebook and began to write with a newly purchased fountain pen. 3 words later, he dropped it in panic. His hand had written by itself, with a will of its own. He slowly moved away from the desk. First, he was in cold sweats, and then in tears. He fell to his knees and covered his face in despair. The man suffering on the ground is called Carlos Riquelme. Before telling his story, it would be appropriate to know some details about him. He is 42 years old and lives in Salamanca, in a little old house protected by tall apartment buildings, an architectural anachronism that pleases the eyes of many. He is a writer of little success, and he is passionate about fountain pens. He collects them and even makes them by hand. His self-made pens have an unexpected quality, and many feel that he should be selling them instead of trying to live off his unfortunate literature. The last pen he produced was a birthday present for Eduardo Pimentel, an older and more successful writer. Although they spoke often, the relationship between them was strange. Carlos admired him in public and envied him in secret. He had wanted to confess that feeling to him for a long time, but a few days after receiving the gift, Eduardo Pimentel took his own life. Carlos was still on his knees on the floor. He felt an irresistible impulse that sat him back in the chair and compelled him to write. His hand seemed to have a life of its own again. He stopped only to look at the pen with hatred. He had bought it second-hand at a nearby antique shop that he used to visit frequently. The owner, knowing the tastes of his regular customer, had recommended it to him. It was worn and the design was coarse, violent, very different from the usual elegance of the pens he made. But it was precisely those imperfections that had captivated him. The ostentatious clip that crowned it also had had an influence on him. He struggled to stop writing. With difficulty, he closed the notebook. He left the house with it under his arm and with the pen in the inside pocket of his jacket. He hurried to the antique shop in search of information. He asked about the origin of the pen. The owner admitted that he had received it from a curly-haired young man, on the condition that he only sells it to Carlos Riquelme. But before doing that, an old man had offered him a high sum for the pen, and he hadn't rejected it. The old man had passed away after a few weeks, and his daughter had returned the pen to the antique shop. Carlos asked some questions and obtained the address of the family who lived on the parallel street and the telephone number of the curly-haired young man. He wasted no time and left the store. He was running, but had to stop to write. He felt the irresistible urge of an addiction. 3 or 4 lines later, he barely managed to get up and continue his journey. He was received by the old man's daughter, who was careless enough to let such a catastrophic man get in. Carlos asked about the pen. The woman explained that she had returned it because of the bad memories it brought. Her late father had bought it, and from the first day, an insane passion had consumed him. The woman stopped talking for a moment. She knew that what she was going to tell him was hard to believe. She said that after several days of continuous writing, her father had committed suicide, and that the story he had been writing explained in detail his last days. This didn't surprise Carlos. Rather, it confirmed what he was already feeling. Then he called the young man with curls from a phone booth and found out that he also lived in Salamanca. He took a bus, and while he was traveling, the pen dominated him again and forced him to continue the story. In the tale he was writing, the protagonist had already bought a cursed object and was looking for information about it. Right now, Carlos is in front of the door. The young man takes his time to open. They finally see each other. Carlos finds the young man familiar. The young man recognizes Carlos. He also perceives the writer's distress, and after pausing for a second, he decides on an arrogant smile. The nervous man introduces himself. "My name is Carlos Riquelme." The young man replies, "I am Mario Pimentel." The surname throws Carlos to the ground. After regaining his composure, he takes the pen out of his pocket and shows it. He asks the young man what he knows about it. Mario answers, "Perhaps you know more. After all, it is you who created it and who gave it to my father. Even while being corrupted by the cursed effect of the pen, my father guessed your intentions and calculated a revenge. I took it for a delusional product of his old age, and although I pretended to believe him so as not to disappoint him, the facts ended up correcting me. At some point, you confessed to my father your tastes regarding pens. With that information, we modified the murderous pen you sent us to make it unrecognizable and attractive. I reasoned that giving it to you directly might arouse suspicion. As you can see, I'm not a good actor, nor did I want to involve third parties, with one exception. I gave the pen to the owner of the antique shop you frequent, on the condition that he never uses it and that he recommends and sells it to you. Then I waited until today." Carlos Riquelme finished his story 3 days later. The pen decreed an end in fire, and the flames consumed the house, the body, and the cursed object. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving a like and subscribing to the channel. Have a good day.